Alright, it's YouTube. This is an iceberg. You know how these go. Let's just start. Furries. Furries refer to a group of people that like funny cartoon animals, more or less. Contrary to popular belief, it isn't always necessarily a sexual fetish. However, there are some who do fetishize the concept and like to get dressed up in costumes known as fursuits. Some furries may even engage in an act known as yiffing with their fursuits on. I'll leave the definition of that slang to your imagination. Many furries are actually quite talented craftsmen that design and create their own fursuits to express their inner persona. Some detractors think that those who fall into the fetish category may be on a slippery slope to doing things with animals that people shouldn't do with animals. This isn't always the case, but there are a few infamous examples of when this has happened, such as the story of Kiro the Wolf. I'd refer you to a video by Turkey Tom on that matter, as I don't want to talk about people that do that kind of thing. Also, to just get a more general, in-depth history lesson, I'd also link to a video by Frederick Knudsen, I'm not sure how to say his last name, down the rabbit hole guy. He did a video a while back about the history of furries, so check that one out if you want to hear the full historical context. For the most part, furries are actually pretty chill, but like all massive fandoms, there's bound to be a creep or two, like the aforementioned Kiro. There's also a stereotype that furries are suspiciously wealthy. There's been some furries that have paid an insane amount for art commissions. I honestly don't know what's up with that. I'd actually recommend a video by Izizi. That Scottish girl with the crazy makeup. I'd recommend a video by her on one of the most expensive furry commissions ever. As the video progresses, I will plug other videos you can watch to get a bigger picture of each of these entries and leave them linked in the description. This iceberg was made more to give a general overview on each entry. Anyway, that was furries. Everyone knows about them by now. They even have a convention called FurCon.
The Chicago Tribune, 19 people were hospitalized at a furry convention in Illinois after what's being called an intentional leak of chlorine
What's
gas.
a furry convention?
Did I get that wrong?
What leaked there? Oh, gosh.
Okay. Officials were called when a strong odor of chlorine spread.
I think they had to evacuate the building and everything. Sent the hotel guests along with convention attendees into the cold night. Many still dressed in their furry costumes.
We have a lot of costumers out here with big fluffy costumes that'll keep people warm, so at this point, we're not at all worried.
Van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was an artist from the Impressionist era that I'm not going to go too in-depth about. Practically everyone who has an inkling or knowledge of the art world has heard his name or seen his work. He's been sort of romanticized as the poster boy of the starving artist stereotype, as he was very unsuccessful when he was alive. He only ever sold one painting while alive to his brother, but his impact on the art world is still felt today. There's of course the infamous ear incident. The poor guy suffered through mental illness in a time when it was severely mishandled and often dismissed and treatments were neglected. Some of his work still serves to inspire and motivate many artists to this day, including his self-portraits and Starry Night, as well as his many recreations of The Sower. Rule 34. Rule 34. If it exists, there is porn of it. If there is no porn of it will be made. This is Rule 34 of the internet. This is taken from a copy pasta from way back in the 2000s. There's even dedicated websites to this. It's probably the only rule that's remained consistently of this crusty ancient meme. There are artists that make a living drawing pornographic recreations of various characters from all kinds of medium. There's not much more to say. People are horny. Moving along. Taxidermy. Taxidermy is classified as an art form, but I think most people these days would find it kind of weird and cruel. Essentially, it's taking the dead body of an animal and stuffing it to be displayed. Over the years, there have been various laws and changes to laws around which animals can and cannot be used in the practice of taxidermy. There are some artists that take pieces from various animals and combine them together in their pieces. Some of these creations might be perceived as cool, but then again, you gotta understand these artists were playing with animal corpses. I don't know. Forgive me for being subjective here, but I just think it's odd. Taxidermy is still practiced to this day. Butch Hartman. Oh boy, where do we even start? Butch Hartman is an American animator best known for his shows Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom. He was once known to be a friendly guy that engaged with fans of his work via his social media presence, but ran into many controversies over the years. There is, of course, the incident where it appeared that he was tracing fan artwork for commissions of which many deemed overpriced and inconsistent in quality. There was a live stream incident where he was clearly triggered by someone's comments about not liking one of his recent works.
Someone says, what do I think of the Axis Family Guy meme? Oh, I'm not even going to look at it because it's the question's being asked by Dueling Duelist True. I'm not even going to look at it, and I don't care. Because you know why? Whenever you put yourself out there to do anything, there's always someone that's going to try and bring you down because they've never done anything on their own. And so if someone wants to do something and they want to ask me questions like that, that's one thing. But if someone doesn't do anything and they want to criticize, then I have no time for them. No time for them. So the person that asked that question, whose name will not be mentioned ever by my lips, I just want to tell all people like that, as I get back to safety here, that if you guys can't do it yourselves, you shouldn't criticize anybody else. You really shouldn't. Now, another cartoonist wants to have a problem with me or whatever, that's a different story. But at least somebody who's actually done something I'll talk to or talk about.
Speaking of theme songs.
Theme songs. You know what's funny? Wait, I want to say one more thing.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
as many things as I've done in my life, like being a father, being a husband, being a guy who's in his 50s who's a boss, a guy who's done shows, a guy who's stayed up late at night working really hard, to answer questions from people who've never done anything and they want to criticize, it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. It's like, really? That's your question? So it's quite amusing, actually. So good luck out there trying to get a rise out of me, because you never will.
And of course, there was the Oaxis streaming service bait and switch plan. Before I talk about that, I must mention Butch Hartman is an outspoken and devout Christian. No problem with that. Believe in what you want. I don't care. But before we get to Oaxis, we have to talk about the Noog Network. Believe it or not, Butch has actually attempted streaming services 3 times. First, there was the Noog Network, which was branding as safe content for kids to consume online. Then there was, of course, Oaxis. This one was advertised as another streaming service similar to the Noog Network, but there was a crowdfunding campaign for this. A lot of people thought, oh yeah, it's that Danny Phantom Fairly Odd Parents guy, I'll throw him a buck for this, because a lot of people are from Boston apparently. And one thing Butch forgot to mention was that the Oaxis Network was intended to have Christian religious content. Most people wouldn't have cared if he said that outright from the start, but not disclosing this information led many critics speaking against him. Eventually, Oaxis was scrapped, but Butch did go through with a Christian streaming service called PureFlix, and is currently working on a show called The Garden, clearly based off the story of Adam and Eve from the Bible. For a more in-depth look at Butch Hartman and his controversies, I'd recommend a video by Saberspack. As I said prior, all supplemental materials will be linked in the description. Junji Ito. Junji Ito is a Japanese mangaka, most known for his horror stories. When someone talks about horror manga, Ito is probably the first name that comes up. He's known for his highly detailed panels with heavy blacks and a carpal tunnel-inducing amount of hatching and cross-hatching. His most famous work is probably Uzumaki. My personal favorite is Tomie. If you want just a taste of his work, I recommend his short story, The Enigma of Amigara Fault. I have a whole video reviewing his entire bibliography that was easily available and translated to English somewhere in my back catalog. That video is kind of old, so I can't really recall what I said in it. But if you're looking for something to watch after this video, there's one for you. Junji Ito is still working on his craft to this day, and at the time of recording this, almost all, if not all, of his works had been translated into English. Beksinksi. Zdzisław Beksinksi is a very difficult name for this American. Also one of the greatest dark surrealist painters of all time. He's known for his surrealistic hellscapes and creatures. His palette is very much on the muddy, rusty side, and that helped bring out a somber tone in his work. There's not much more to say about this guy. The guy was a great painter, and I want to share that with you if you were unfamiliar. You know, I just really like his stuff. For a deeper dive, I'd recommend a video by In Praise of Shadows. Link down below. Art of the mentally ill. As the name implies, this entry refers to artwork created by people afflicted with various mental illnesses. It is kind of interesting to see if and how their mental conditions affected their work. For instance, the works of Brian Charnley. Charnley was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He created many self-portraits as his condition gradually worsened. It's interesting to see what changes were made as he went along. Tragically, Charnley ended up taking his own life, but has left behind a beautiful body of work. I should also note that just because a person has a mental illness, their artwork shouldn't be used as a diagnostic tool or even fetishized in some cases. A person with a mental illness contributions to the art world are just as important and valid as a person without one. Also, there's a stereotype, not as common as it used to be, but still present, that artists that make stuff that might be classified as a little weird, or maybe more on the surrealistic side, suffer from some kind of mental illness. This isn't as prevalent as it used to be, but it's still somewhat of a thing. That line of thinking is quite cruel and insulting. Mental illnesses are a serious problem, and no one should feel any shame for seeking help. If you'd like to see a more in-depth look at various works from people who have suffered from mental illnesses, I'd recommend a few videos by Shrouded Hand. I'd also recommend putting the subtitles on because his Scottish accent is thick. Art roasters. Oh boy, I've been waiting to get to this one. Art roasters are the declination of the YouTube art community, and I've got a bone to pick with them. Art roasting is a genre of YouTube video where someone will give critique, or better yet criticism, solicited or unsolicited, to usually beginner artists. The genre rose to prominence in the very late 2010s with YouTuber Ethan Becker. Ethan is an animator and art teacher that rose to YouTube fame by calling out artists like Kim Jong-gi for not drawing exactly like him. He is also a Koolean defender, which I will most definitely get to Koolean in a later entry. Keep watching. He played a character in these videos, which he ended up retiring because a lot of people couldn't tell. However, after retiring this character, he continued to make the exact same type of content and presenting himself almost identically to his character. Frequently, he would post videos calling out popular artists for not drawing exactly like him, with the most minor of tips that are only applicable in very specific situations. His content is still quite popular today and fostered a community of toxic art roasters. Coming to mind is, of course, Sam Does Arts and Koolean. Koolean has her own entry, but on the subject of Sam Does Arts, he at least asks for submissions who know they're going to get roasted. However, he is constantly going over artwork by beginners, very obviously beginners, and while not offering any advice or tips on how to improve, often just goes, "Ha, hand look funny." Oh, I'm sorry. Haha, hand so funny. Look at a little art baby. I gotta talk really low so my parents don't hear me recording. Because he calls his viewers art babies. Sorry, Sam Does Arts fans. I just don't get it. I'd recommend watching Marco Bucci or Mark Brunette if you actually want to improve and get good advice and lessons. Submitting to an art roaster is only going to make the audience think you have a humiliation kink. Moving along. Please stop this trend. I hate it. Unfortunately, the algorithm loves it. Moving on. NFTs. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are probably one of, if not the worst thing to happen to the art world. Essentially, an NFT is a specific code to an image. To break this down, if you upload an image to the internet, it can be right-click saved and infinitely copied. If you were to mint it into an NFT, it would have its own unique code that could be purchased with cryptocurrency. So you're not technically buying the image, you're buying the unique code to the image. We have a lot of vocab to cover, so pay attention, class. Cryptocurrency is stuff like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum, etc. It's essentially digitized money in layman's terms. It can be purchased in exchange for real currency. The key difference between cryptocurrency and real money is that cryptocurrency is decentralized and not controlled by the government of your country. These coins are also classified as deflative currency rather than inflative ones like dollars or euros. Bitcoins, for instance, eventually every Bitcoin will be made, which will increase their value. Scarcity equals value mentality. This is backed by a public ledger known as the blockchain. Everyone's crypto wallet is visible to the public. You can see every exchange of crypto ever made. This blockchain is also what backs the purchases of NFTs. On to minting. Minting is the act of creating an NFT. First, you need an image. Then you take that image and mint via gas fees. So in order to turn an image into an NFT, tons of GPUs or graphics cards needs to process countless complex equations. This takes what's known as a crypto farm. Warehouses filled with computers with high-powered GPUs. To mint, you pay the owner of these crypto farms to do it for you, a la gas fees. This, however, brings environmental concerns. The power it takes to mint a single NFT is equivalent to the amount of power the average European household uses in an entire year. A lot of artists refuse to create NFTs for this reason alone. Once minted, an NFT needs to go to a digital marketplace like OpenSea, where crypto bros can waste money on ugly artwork, some of which is AI generated. This whole thing seems like an elaborate money laundering scheme from the outside looking in. NFTs rose to popularity when popular artist Beeple sold one for $69 million. The story broke through art circles and hit mainstream news. Then a bunch of people got greedy and flooded the market. A bubble was created and crashed within the span of 2 years, more or less. There are still people making NFTs to this day, however. NFTs are also heavily associated with scams. I'm sure we've all had those robotic Instagram messages pop up in our feeds, but Instagram bots will have their own entry. Overall, I think they're just kind of a waste of time. If you want my initial reaction to the NFT boom before the bubble bursted, there's an old video on this channel you can watch. Link in the description. AI art. Oh boy. Those familiar with the channel are ready for this one. So, AI art refers to images created with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Basically, to keep it brief, computers are trained off of databases of images to generate new images, more or less. There's a lot of controversy around AI art and AI in general, especially in these last few years as the technology has gotten better. Many of the popular AI generators, such as Stable Diffusion, Dali, and Midjourney, have come under legal troubles because the databases of images that they use to create art contain copyrighted material. One could also train an AI on stolen artwork as well, such as the Sam Does Arts incident for reference. There have also been nefarious uses for AI art, such as deceptive propaganda and illegal pornography. Basically, it's a whole thing. If you want my personal thoughts on it, just look through the backlog of my videos. What this entry is actually mainly referring to is just how bizarre some of these renders can get. The modern version of AI renders always hit that uncanny valley. If you're unaware, the uncanny valley refers to something that looks human but something just isn't right. There are ways to spot AI art if you're unsure. The key areas are eyes and hands, as well as legs in my opinion. I keep seeing renderings of weird legs in recent days. I don't know, probably because these AI models are being trained off of their own bad renders. I want to talk about earlier attempts at AI art. Artbreeder was one of my favorites before the advancements happened and greed took over. But we'll talk about greed in the next entry. These renders were insane, so much so that I actually used them to reinterpret into creature designs. Once again, check my older videos. I believe there was also a video by Nexpo looking at some of AI's horrifying renders, so check that one out too. AI art prompting classes. Remember when I said greed took over? Well, this is one of the things I was talking about. Aside from people making AI art renders based off of stolen artwork, minting them into NFTs, and even going so far as to sell AI pieces at conventions without disclosing that they were AI generated, because, well, most artists would probably have a bone to pick with the AI bro, to say the least. But anyway, this one specifically refers to AI art prompting classes, which are quite a Nigerian prince level scam. You have to have a negative IQ to fall for this. But a lot of AI art bros do. Essentially, you pay someone to teach you how to write stuff into the AI prompt. Mind blowing. Really, these people are scummy. Don't give them a dime. Speaking about scummy, Google's racist AI. Google's racist AI refers to Google Gemini. Gemini was their attempt to enter the AI art generator market, and when people got around to playing with it, well, it showed a clear racial favoritism. In short, it wouldn't generate white people. Even if you specifically typed white or some historical figure who is known to be white, it would blackwash them. After a bit of digging, people found out that the lead programmer was big into the whole woke culture stuff, you know, DEI, ESG, all that stuff. And it seemed that this was deliberate. I believe they even briefly shelved it because of the backlash to refusing to generate a single white person. I don't know. I don't really care. It's more AI slop. Who cares, honestly? Nothing will ever truly replace human artists. Speaking of human artists, Hieronymous Bosch. Hieronymous Bosch was a Dutch proto-Renaissance painter that specialized in all things horrifying and surreal. One could argue that he was the godfather of horror art and dark surrealism. He was frequently commissioned by the Catholic Church to illustrate and paint depictions of hell and the horrors within. There has been some speculation that he may have suffered from some kind of mental illness or had been exposed to chemicals that altered his perception to create these hellscapes or something like that. However, that's just speculation, and as stated in the Art by the Mentally Ill entry, spooky art does not mean mental illness, and that's a rude assumption. His most famous work is his triptych, The Garden of Earthly Delights. He's also one of my favorite Renaissance artists, so that's kind of why I wanted to put that there to show off one of my favorite artists. I love his stuff. Anyway, speaking of Renaissance artists, Michelangelo's broken back. Everyone knows Michelangelo from the Renaissance, and of course the Ninja Turtles. There's of course the Statue of David, but his other most famous work is of course the secco fresco paintings on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, depicting various scenes from the Bible. In order to paint the ceiling, Michelangelo needed to lie on his back with his arms above him on scaffolding. Looking at how many paintings are on the ceiling and how beautifully detailed they were, it raises the question, what did it cost? Based on research, he experienced lifelong pain to his neck and arms, a rotator cuff tear, and cervical disc degeneration. He also most likely experienced vertigo, and it goes without saying he definitely had back pain. He even wrote about it. Quote, "I've already grown a goiter from this torture, hunched up here like a cat in Lombardy, or anywhere else where the stagnant water's poison. My stomach squashed under my chin, my beard's pointing at heaven, my brain's crushed in a casket, my breast twists like a harpy's. My brush above me all the time dribbles paint to my face, makes a fine floor for droppings. My haunches are grinding into my guts. My poor ass strains to work as a counterweight. Every gesture I make is blind and aimless. My skin hangs loose below me. My spine's all knotted from folding over itself. I'm bent taut as a Syrian bow. Because I'm stuck like this, my thoughts are crazy, perfidious tripe. Anyone shoots badly through a crooked blowpipe. My painting is dead. Defend it for me, Giovanni. Protect my honor. I am not in the right place. I am not a painter." End quote. Ow, that sounds painful. Speaking about pain, let's talk about another Renaissance painter that inflicted pain to others. Caravaggio's murder. Caravaggio is arguably one of the most important Renaissance painters of his era. He was at the head of the Baroque movement, which shifted paintings from very stiff to these lively, dynamic figures and intense lighting, which still influences the art world to this day. And as someone who has seen Caravaggios in person, I will add, yes, that they are incredible works. They're beautiful. Amazing paintings. However, Caravaggio himself, not such a nice guy to say the least. He had a notorious temper and even went as far as to commit murder. Apparently there was a brawl between him and an individual named Ranuccio Tomassoni. Historians can't pin down the exact reason the brawl occurred. Some sources say it was over some kind of debt. Other sources say it was over a tennis match of all things. The murder occurred in May of 1606. Some evidence suggests that Caravaggio was only trying to wound him but not kill him, but come on, why are you pulling a sword if you don't intend to kill? He fled Rome after the incident and ended up in Naples. There's a paper trail of work from him from 1606 to his inevitable death in 1610, which was deemed mysterious by all the historians I'm reading for this entry. Whatever that means. Mysterious for whatever reason. There's also debates of whether or not these paintings are really attributed to Caravaggio or artists inspired by his work, as he was a big shot when he ran away. And being a big shot, much like it still is today, he actually got away with murder. He received an official pardon from Pope Paul V. This pardon, however, did come after his mysterious death, but for the last 4 years of his life he remained in hiding, running from the consequences of his actions. Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon was a surrealist / abstract / horror artist who lived from 1909 to 1992. His paintings are quite unsettling and depict horrific interpretations of people that may even be classified as body horror. A lot of his paintings stem from various traumas, having lived through 2 world wars. He was also a gay man at a time when homosexuality was still being demonized, and even in some cases considered a mental illness. Luckily, by the time he passed, people had become more understanding of homosexuality and accepting of gay people. There is one particular incident of note that I want to mention for this entry, and that was the self-deletion of George Dyer. Forgive me for using that word, but on YouTube you can't say the S word. It's an auto flag. I have to say self-deletion instead. Forgive me, I know it's a little disrespectful. Dyer was a close friend and even speculated to be a lover of bacon. I mean, who doesn't love bacon? Francis Bacon, I mean. In 1971, when Francis Bacon was unveiling a retrospective exhibition, he ended his life immediately before the opening. There have been some speculations and conspiracies around the matter, but all in all, the event tragically affected Bacon and influenced his work going forward. Bacon was a bit of an odd guy, to say the least. There were also instances of him getting his own paintings destroyed because he was dissatisfied with them. I'd highly recommend a documentary called Francis Bacon, A Brush with Violence to get the full picture. If it's still available on YouTube at the time of posting this, I will link it in the description. Salvidor Dali's pet anteater. Salvidor Dali was the guy when it came to surrealism art at the turn of the century. His most famous of work is, of course, The Persistence of Memory. Side note, this painting is actually smaller than a standard piece of American printer paper. Dali was a very eccentric guy, to say the least. He dabbled in many mediums, even made some movies, but he is, of course, most known for his paintings. This entry just refers to one thing I thought that was just kind of odd, Like, he had a pet anteater named Babu, or Babo. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. And he was often seen with the anteater on the streets of Paris. I just think this is odd, and I wanted to let you know about it, and to put this picture on screen. As for the dark, weird, and controversial, this definitely just falls into the weird category. But our next entry is going back to the dark category. Chris Chan and Sonichu. Worthy of an iceberg all its own. Chris Chan, birth name Christopher Weston Chandler, later changed to Christian Weston Chandler, changed once again to Christian Ricardo Weston Chandler, once again changed to Christine Ricardo Weston Chandler, once again changed to Christine Ricardo Weston Chandler, CPU Goddess Blueheart, changed once more to Christine Ricardo Weston Chandler, CPU Goddess Blueheart Chris Chan Sonichu, and recently changed the Jesus Christ Christine Ricardo Weston Chandler, CPU Goddess Blueheart Chris Chan Sonichu, is quite the character, with many names. That's a lot of names. But he's most known as Chris Chan. So Chris Chan is what is known as a lol cow, arguably the first one. In short, they're basically people that feed the trolls and can be milked for laughs, hence lol cow. He rose up to prominence mostly from his attraction sign seeking a boyfriend-free girl that he posted around his community college campus, but also for the reason he's technically an artist. And that's, of course, the infamous webcomic Sonichu. Sonichu is a very crudely drawn and hard-to-read comic that was intended to be a mashup of Sonic the Hedgehog and Pikachu from the Pokemon franchise. If you want my thoughts on the comic specifically, check out my Sonichu review. If you want more information on Chris Chan, that rabbit hole is too deep. I'm also not one for trigger warnings, but I'm putting every possible trigger warning imaginable on this one. Research at your own risk. We're just gonna move on. CreepShow Art. Speaking of lolcows, CreepShow Art is another iceberg of its own worthy entry on this list. CreepShow Art, aka Shannon, was an art commentary YouTuber. I will have a more detailed description in Tier 2 of this iceberg, but the very brief summary of art commentary YouTubers is that essentially they're channels that make commentary-style videos, but instead of gameplay footage, as is tradition for commentary channels, they show artwork. But there's more to it than that. We'll be getting to that in the next tier, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Anyway. CreepShow Art was a very toxic individual that often painted herself as one with moral superiority over others and was exposed for many horrible things. There's of course the blatant allegiance to the hard left ideology, which wouldn't be that much of a problem if she wasn't exposed as a hypocrite. There's a mountain of evidence of her basically being the complete opposite of what she says she stands for anonymously, in quotes, posting on various message boards. There was also the harassment campaign she led against art commentary YouTuber Hopeless Peaches, which has an entry all its own in the next tier. It was honestly quite a nasty situation. And above all, there was the years and years of stalking and harassment of fellow art YouTuber Emily Artful, who was the first person to come forward with mountains upon mountains of evidence of CreepShow Art's horrid behavior. There's more, but we'll be here all day. Even some evidence of crimes involving minors. Yeah, it's really disgusting. Like I said earlier, this list is just a general overview of each entry, but some of these are worthy of an iceberg all their own. I'd actually recommend a video by Turkey Tom about this entire saga, but I will warn you it's over 3 hours long and unfortunately contains clips of CreepShow Art speaking. This whole thing was quite the news story when it broke in 2021 on YouTube, where even big YouTubers outside of the art tuber sphere were covering it. To be honest, I don't really want to go into more depth about this situation, as there's a chance some of her victims, who are YouTubers, might actually come across this video, and I don't want to risk bringing up their personal traumas. Okay? In short, Shannon was a two-face and got what she deserved in the end. And that concludes Tier 1 of the dark, weird, and controversial artist Iceberg. Please subscribe for the next video. If you have any suggestions for entries in a additional user-submitted tier that I'm going to tag on to the end of this series, please leave them in the description below. I will pan the iceberg across screen now so you can see all the entries I've written. I made this iceberg myself, so if there's anything more that you want me to talk about in a bonus user-submitted video, please leave them below. If there are any mistakes I made in this video that you know that I messed up, please leave corrections in the comments below, and I will add them in a pinned comment or in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more like it, well, subscribe, and I will be continuing this series. And, check out the other stuff on the channel. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Have a good day. Goodbye.